Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the latest episode of the INCHSTONES podcast. I have today the team at NeuroFit Connections here, Dr. Timothy Beck and his lovely wife, who I've only met for quite literally 4 seconds and feel so simpatico because there's something very primal about a woman and mother's love for children, especially those of us that have children with profound special needs. I am thrilled to have them here in conversation today to share about what their practice offers, but their why. Because I believe that so many of us that get to experience the therapists, the educators, the clinicians that support our children, the why behind it and the heart behind the soul of their work is so important to us in trusting practitioners to work with our children. So, Dr. Timothy, and thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure.
Well, before we press record, I said, what is your favorite thing to answer? And I'd love for us to jump back into that to have the listeners hear this. What is your why behind why you started NeuroFit Connections?
Well, I can speak for me. My why is that I was working for another company doing something extremely similar, but there was newer practices being put into place that they were not doing. And I felt like I cannot, in good conscience, and I loved my job. I loved the company I worked for. But I couldn't treat those children without updating the protocols, which I knew working for another company, it would not happen. So that's when I went to Tim and said, we got to open our own business. We got to do this on our own because they deserve the best. If you're not giving them the best, then why are you even doing it? They deserve everything you've got. And my big why is because every child has this desire to be something in the world and give back. No matter what, even if they're not verbal, they are very, very intelligent, and they should be able to be whatever they dream of being. If they have developmental delays, some struggles, learning disorders, sensory issues that are holding them back, I want to get those barricades out of their way so they can be whatever they dream of being. It's heartache to see a child not be able to become what they want due to a developmental delay that can easily be corrected.
I think, you hit so much just as a provider on this, but as a woman and mother, we as mothers, we see that so innately in our child. We just want them to become the best versions of who they're meant to be without those barriers. Yet the barriers are so there, and they are so pervasive into every bit of home life, into school. I always say, I can't even let my son walk down the 4 steps to get to his transportation without eyes on him and guidance because he's in the road. He's in the middle of the road. And yet when he looks back and checks in with me as a mother, I go, that little boy's in there. That little soul of that little boy.
Yeah.
And so I think knowing that there's providers out there that see that in our children as well is such a grounding point. So talk to me more. I know before you said, Dr. Tim, you said she could talk about primitive reflexes all day long. I could listen about primitive reflexes all day long. So tell me about this and why it's such a passion of yours.
Because that's really the root cause of most all developmental delays, and they should not be there after a year old. So what are we doing? What are we missing? And why do I have a 15-year-old in my office with primitive reflexes? Should not happen. And so to do them correctly is very specific. And a lot of people don't understand that. They'll see things on Instagram or Facebook and they're doing it and they're like, oh, that's all I have to do. No, there's a specific stimulus and movement pattern that has to happen. Without doing it properly, they could have those prims for years and still struggle. And that's what we need to get rid of.
What does that look like? Like you said, for any child coming in, their age, their gender doesn't matter. These are things that have to be worked through in a very scientific and modular form. How does that translate from the office then into real life? Is this something that parents can learn to do at home as well, or do you find that it's really beneficial in this like deeply intensive therapeutic sense? And therapeutic environment.
Actually, right. It has to happen on a very consistent basis. So I teach the parent how to do them correctly. I watch them do it, so I know they're doing it correctly. And they do that on the days they're not coming in to see me. When they come in to see me, I might do different things, but I'm always going to do the primitive reflexes, but then also coordination and balance and all those other components. The mother is going to do the primitive reflexes and some core and eye work at home. We don't like them to have a lot to do, That's why we want them in center on a consistent basis. Those prims need to be done every day, a couple times a
Yeah.
day to get them
Yes. And
gone.
it's so interesting, generalization is a word that's just so pervasive for a special needs parent, right? Because it's like, well, what do you see in home and what do you see in school and what do you see in therapy settings? And I think there's there with that comes an intensive weight for the parent and caregiver because it's like it's a separate job, right? To just keep all these therapies and the progression of it going along. How I know you said at the beginning, you see such value in the humanity behind each of these kids. I always like to say that that happens with the parent as well, too. And when they are met with a practitioner who sees that same humanity in the behind the eyes of the child, those small, what I call inchstones of developmental wins do add up in the long run. And they
Yes.
really do. They can make the weight of the role that a caregiver has for a child that's developmentally delayed. It can feel lighter because if you notice those small little wins, what are some small inchstones that you might see in practice through children that you treat?
Usually at first it's going with an autistic child. The first thing I notice, and the parent does too, they don't know how to articulate it typically,
Mhm,
is
mhm.
that fog or that glazed over look in their eyes. Suddenly they're looking around like they're really looking at you and they're really looking at something and observing something. It's like that fog's been lifted. And that's the first thing that we notice is they're actually looking. I have a 2-year-old I work with, and she will do sit-ups with me, and she will really look at me. And her dad even said, "Whoa, she's really connecting with you in through
Yeah.
her because she's nonverbal. Through her eyes, she's really looking at me." And I make very expressive faces when she does a sit up. We celebrate every single one of them. And she's like, "Wow, that's an interesting face she's
Uh-huh.
making." And
Right.
that's the first thing in imitation is observing. So she's
Yes.
really starting to get there.
Yes. That's a great segue. So what would a typical one-on-one session look like? How long are they in your center? And, like you shared that there are expectations to carry throughout the home, but that the best of work comes from those one-on-one sessions. Is it an intake process? What does that look like for your practice? And how can my listeners understand more about, specifically your work?
Well, it starts with an assessment. So it's a 2.5 hour assessment, depending on the child. Now, that's a very high functioning child. We'll go through auditory, ocular, vestibular, all of the systems get tested. So we can yeah. So we can really pinpoint where the developmental delay is because when you meet one autistic child, you've met one, right? You know
That's
better than
right.
any that they're
Even
all
having
so
even
different.
having a boy and a girl that are siblings, you still have only met
You're
one.
still completely different.
They
That's
are
right.
they are siblings, but they are not the same person.
They're so different. And I do work with a lot of ADHD and dyslexia as well.
Mhm.
Where was I headed?
Well, actually stop right there though. Talk to me about those the vestibular and the proprioceptive pathways because I think a lot of my audience and listeners sometimes need a refresher on that. So could you talk about that first?
Right. Well, the ocular and the vestibular work beautifully together. And testing them, you have to test them separately, but you also want to test them together to see if their intake is coming in. Is it slow processing? Is it the output that they don't have a grasp on? So we do a lot of vestibular testing, cerebellum testing, just by doing different things. And it does depend on the age of the child, how much and how deep I can go. So for vestibular, I'm going to check all the canals in different head positions to see where that issue is.
So what is vestibular impact?
Okay, do you want to you go ahead? Well, I wasn't going to go there. The impact would be, a child that doesn't have sense of where their body is in space.
Yes.
So when they close their eyes, do they want to fall over? Do they lose track? We do the Fukuda test, the most fun test. They love doing that test because they end up in a different spot. They're like, wait a minute, I had a little boy do this. He did the Fukuda and he made a sharp left turn. And I'm like, you can open your eyes now. And he's like, did you
What?
move me? So yes, we're looking at a vestibular issue there. But his balance was pretty good. So I'm not going to concern myself too much with balancing with eyes open.
Right.
I'm going to work on eyes closed. We're going to work on spinning. We're going to work on other vestibular exercises to help strengthen that area, depending on, which canal it was and all that. So we do that. We do a great auditory system done by Acoustic Pioneer, which will tell us, are they struggling with tone? Which kind of
Hmm.
tone? Is it left-sided, right-sided? Speed, filtering, all of that stuff that needs to help a child be successful in school. Where is the
Hmm.
problem? And it's interesting because most every child with a developmental delay, almost every single one has an auditory problem. The parents will tell me they've been to a doctor, they've had the hearing testing, but then I find a problem. So it's very thorough testing we do here because we really want to help. All the systems work together, so we have to check all systems.
That's something that's, I hope, that is going to rise more and more in the autism and you know, divergent community, is that there's so many systems here. And I know that so many parents want these solid answers of like, what is it? And what do I solve for first? And how do and I'll solve for one thing and I'll solve for the next. And I love that you just hit on that, because there are multiple systems that work here. Just like it's so good to have multiple eyes on your child. My internal maternal intuition on my children is data for sure. But the data that practitioners like you and your counterparts intake is also really very real data. And I think we need to take in those systems as well, because if we don't, we are doing a child a disservice, right? There's so many things that are going into each part of that system, but to break it down, we have to just be solving it in the moment for what that practitioner knows through all the information that's taken in about that child.
Yep, I agree. And to do less than that is not serving them at all.
That's
They're
right.
still
That's
gonna
right.
have struggles, and we don't want them to have any struggles. I like to tell them that they're gonna be unstoppable because
Yes.
they'll be able to do anything they want when all their systems are high functioning and working together.
And I believe too that the belief in the child is so important. And I can tell just by even just seeing your faces right here that the belief that you have in every child that comes into your office also creates the reason that there's such success. And I think that it's such a it's such a breath of fresh air in this community where our children are seen as so less than or so incapable that we lead with what they're not capable of doing instead of what they are. Having a boy and a girl cannot divorce primal male versus primal female. Like I'll be the first to explain, I'm the first to, openly pronounce, you don't have children, a boy trying to be a girl or a girl trying to be a boy when there's profound autism in the case. You are a boy or you are a girl, period. And I'm telling you right now, when I see the differences of how they have slowly developed, even in that very, very marginally smaller delayed sense, there's a belief that's behind that comes from their therapists. And I think that you guys are setting such a great example of that.
Great. Well, thank you. We do believe in each child and, you know, every child, you've got 2 autistic children. I like to say to you, you have 2 geniuses on your hand.
Do you see that at times? Yes.
You really do, and the more you take them out of the fog or give them some skills that they can work with, strengthening that right hemisphere, which is what needs to be done with an autistic
Mm-hmm.
child, you get to see they have a sense of humor or they have a photographic memory. They have
Mm-hmm.
skills beyond their years. And
Yes.
it's really only fair to say all of these children have its diagnosis functional disconnect. But what that's really talking about is an unevenness of skills. So you've got one
Mm-hmm.
hemisphere way above their age level, geniuses.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the other side, which is below their age. So it's an
Mm-hmm.
unevenness of skills. And what we want to do, let them keep all their gifts and their
Yes.
specialties and bring that right brain up to meet it and then get the 2 hemispheres talking and do some horizontal integration as well as going up. That's what it's all about. That's really
Do you
the crux of everything.
see current Do you see current therapy settings or the forward progress really starting to talk about that right and left brain? I feel and see it in a really positive way for my kids in sort of the holistic child approach that their school takes for them, but actually discussing that their left brain is so flooded in greatness, right? But they
It
need that right
is.
brain and those skills. And that bridge is going to take very, very conscious and curated time that's going to be different for every child. Could you give me an example of an incredible breakthrough that you might have had with obviously without naming names, but with a patient that you've seen that bridge form and what that gave to that child from an independent or agency sense? Because I think that when I've seen the bridge happen with my kids, either one of them, the independence that it gives and the joy that it brings to my children when they have that bridge happen after years of therapy and education is such a luxury. I always say there's nothing you can purchase that is more luxurious than your child bridging a skill. So is there any examples that you can share with us about children having aha moments or those bridges happening?
So yes, we had, I think it was angering to me as well as gratifying. So that's why I like to use this example, because it put me in a mood and I was like, that just really aggravates me, but yay, she did well. And what happened was we had a teenager, so it's a tough age anyway, and she was diagnosed Asperger's and ADHD. She was not doing well in school, and she wanted her goal, because I love to ask the kids what their goal is, because that matters just as much as mom and dad's goals.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they're invested. And so her goal was to get out of what she called the dumb math class.
Mm.
We all know, all been there, right? I'm in the remedial reading or whatever, and they know. You can call it A and B. They know. So she was really wanting to prove herself. I don't need to be in that class anymore. And I said, okay. So we worked through the program, and it was time to take finals for that semester. And she was really excited because she really felt like, I got this. I feel really smart these days. I'm going to do well. She was the second child completed in the test. She handed her test in to the teacher, and the teacher handed it back to her and said, there's no way you could have done that. Erase your answers and redo it. Yep, you feel my pain. And I was like, they did what? Yeah, I was a little aggravated for the child and how humiliated she was. At 14, she's going to be embarrassed.
The shame factor at a 14-year-old is already so high. It's
Exactly.
already so high.
There's no need to add to it.
Right.
So she redid the test and aced it the second time. And I said, yes, she's out of that class. But I was so aggravated, but also she doesn't qualify for an IEP anymore. She doesn't fit the diagnosis anymore. She's off and running. She's a perfect now 15-year-old going on with her life and gets to be whatever she dreamt of being, because she now can be completely unstoppable with all her gifts. And then that strong right brain as well now.
Well, I also have a typical 13-year-old, right? So I've got a typical developing 13-year-old with, two children with profound needs. And what I have always said throughout my course of learning about Millie and Max educational and therapeutic learning environments is that it would also have helped my typical older developing one too. Because the skills that y'all are teaching in your practice are not something that are just for children with, high support needs. They are things that are so universal. I mean, I always say, I wish I could go back and do ABA sometimes. ABA therapy, I'm sorry, the more modern ABA is phenomenal. It's wonderful. If it's with a team that's deeply, loving and supportive, there's reason behind all of these therapies that are so beneficial to anyone. And so I love that you shared that even about a more higher functioning, child with Asperger's that no longer needs the support of an IEP, but still benefited so deeply from the work that you're doing of bridging those things.
Yeah, it was a happy and gratifying day.
Yes.
After I got off to being mad at the teacher for doing such a horrible thing to a 14-year-old.
Well, so can I ask on a more personal level, what brought you into doing this kind of work?
It's really a boring story, actually. I was working at a gym at the front desk, and one of the athletes that I used to work out with said, hey, you should apply it in my work. And because she knew I liked kids, I had 4, and I did. And I thought, I still
you
work
still
with
do, yeah. You still do have 4 children.
Not for the company, but And after she said, just come observe, see if it's something you might like. I was sold. I was like, are you going to pay me to do this? I get to do this? And then I really learned what I was doing, what it was doing for them. And I couldn't get enough of the reading. Anything they had on the shelves, I would grab and read. I was just taken back. And for the first couple months, I never even saw a paycheck. They just got directly deposited. I had no idea what they were paying me. I really didn't care. He asked me, he goes, "So what are you making an hour?" And
Yeah.
I said, "Do they pay me? I don't know. I don't care." I was really loving my job.
Right.
So, yes, it was a weird thing. It wasn't something I went after, but boy, am I sure glad I did.
That's awesome. And Dr. Beck, how about you? What's the origin story of you in this field?
The day I went to him and said, "We got to start our own business."
So it was a little bit before that, though, because during COVID, our offices were back to back. So I could hear her talking to the kids
Working from home.
working from home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it would always start out with, I don't know if I can be able to help this kid via Zoom. I don't know. And then, I just go, I'm sure you can, she'll be fine. And then a couple weeks later, be like, oh my God, this kid is so awesome. And that it was success story after success story after success story. And when she came to me and said, "Oh, we need to do this," I was like, okay.
And that was his response. He's like,
Okay.
"Okay, let's do it."
Yeah.
Well, I think that, like you said, there are amazingly beautiful things to come out of a really wild global pandemic, right? And whatever we feel on that, but being able to sit so closely to the work of your partner, I can only imagine was very beneficial and probably one of the best things that probably happened for you guys as a family is that you got to literally be right outside the wall of the work and hearing that. That's a wonderful story. If you could share with everyone how any listeners around the country can find your work. I know that y'all are based in North Carolina, but is there anything you'd like to share more openly about your practice and how people that are in the area that you serve can find you?
The easiest thing is we have a toll-free number, 833-NFC-KIDS. You can also find us on the web at neurofitconnections.com. Honestly, you can contact us. We'll answer any questions. I've had people reaching out to us from all over the world, India, Australia, all over the world, who reach out, and we'll help them the best that they can. And if they want to come here, we're happy to treat them here. Ideally, we'd have an assessment in person, and the rest of it can be done remotely. It's better in person, but it can be also done remotely.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for what you do. And I really believe that we are all just standing on the shoulders of giants to promote and continue to grow the understanding and the broadening of awareness to what the gifts are within children that have developmental delays and autism and neurodiversity. And you two are clearly so deeply a part of that. So thank you so much for what you do.
No, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Well, we will list all of NeuroFit Connections details on the episode summary here. And thank you all for listening and taking the time to take in this wonderful journey of this one company and to what is deeply within each child that we have and continue to grow alongside them as the parents and caregivers. And until next time on the INCHSTONES podcast.
Great.